Right, let's take you to that top story now. There does appear to be some movement in Irene in Pretoria, where the ANC's NEC has been locked in talks all afternoon. President Jacob Zuma's future in the highest office in the land hangs in the balance. The urgent meeting was called following talks between ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa and President Zuma over the weekend. Ramaphosa was expected to table his report on his meeting with President Zuma, which will then be debated. The SABC understands that President Zuma, who is absent from the meeting, had wanted to present a report to the 86-member NEC, but that was rejected. The political impasse has led to the indefinite postponement of the State of the Nation address that was scheduled for last week. And that followed the cancellation of another urgent NEC meeting last week after the ANC described the talks between President Zuma and his deputy Ramaphosa as being fruitful and constructive. However, President Zuma is still in office as we speak. This as pressure has been mounting on the newly elected ANC leadership to recall President Zuma, who has so far refused to step down. Let's now go to Irene, where our political reporter Aldrin Sampear is standing by. Aldrin, thanks very much for joining us. It's been since 2 o'clock, and I suppose as far as important NEC meetings go, they haven't really been at it that long.
Yeah, well, certainly, considering that this is an urgent NEC meeting that was called. Remember, after the one that was supposed to have happened last week, Wednesday, was postponed when President Jacob Zuma and Cyril Ramaphosa started the meeting that was described as constructive and fruitful. If indeed that meeting was constructive and fruitful, I guess we wouldn't be here. A decision would have been taken a long time ago, and President Jacob Zuma would have probably acceded to this demand by the ANC that he steps down as president of the country. But as this indicates that it is quite a contentious issue, and I've been emphasizing as well in previous interviews as well that President Jacob Zuma still has influence within the ANC's NEC. I understand that he had asked to be part of today's meeting, where he was expected to table a report as well, but that was not agreed to. So the the former president of the ANC, as an ex-official member who was here during the previous NEC meeting that was taking place right here at St. George's Hotel, where he was present, this time around is not present as the ANC discuss his future. As it stands at the moment, we also understand that a number of NEC members who have said that they want to have their inputs also heard with regards to this matter. They have not spoken. Not all of them have spoken at this moment. But of course, the final decision would be a decision that comes down to what Cyril Ramaphosa makes of it, and how he will deal with this matter heading forward, considering that he's already had these meetings with President Jacob Zuma, and evidently President Jacob Zuma has not agreed to some of these demands that have been made by the ANC's top 6 officials.
ANC has always prided itself in consensus building, and that they don't like to vote on issues such as this. With that being the case, are we likely to get a decision today, or might they just keep pushing on until tomorrow?
Well, if you remember back in 2008, was it, in Kempton Park, when the NEC sat down to discuss this matter, it took hours. It took hours into the early hours of the morning, around about 2 a.m. That's when a decision was taken. And you're right that the NEC doesn't bring matters down to a vote, but they agree on matters based on consensus. And this is such a contentious issue because there's been this pushback. And if you look at the previous motions of no confidence, or rather attempts to have a motion of no confidence in President Jacob Zuma, the 3 last year, there was no voting that took place. It was an issue that was debated. And just remembering now how Fikile Mbalula spoke at the ANC's policy conference about those NEC meetings where there was these motions of no confidence, he said, quote unquote, they were defeated. And I wonder if that same language would be used this time around, also considering that the dynamics have changed, the political landscape has changed. We're not speaking of Jacob Zuma as the president of the ANC anymore, but the former president of the ANC. And remember that the ANC has been emphasizing, and this was reaffirmed at the elective conference as well, that the center of power is with the ANC. It lies at Lutulia House, and Lutulia House will decide on its deployees, who gets deployed where, and so forth within government. But earlier on as well, I was telling Alicia that we saw an email that was sent to one political party, where it's an email that came from a law firm, and these lawyers were saying that they are willing to challenge whatever the outcome of this NEC decision is, where there is an agreement on the basis where you'd find that President Jacob Zuma may still have some sort of influence with regards to who becomes minister and who still remains minister. If you remember that some reports have been indicating that the president has said that he would like some of his cabinet ministers to remain in the cabinet up until the term comes to an end in 2019. And the argument from these lawyers is that if you have that, that would mean that President Jacob Zuma will be asserting pressure on the president of the country, the newly elected president of the country, whoever that is, and that would mean that the powers of that elected president would then have been taken away from him by Jacob Zuma, who would not be president of the country at that time. And that's the reason they believe that it would be unconstitutional. So we'll have to wait and see what the outcome of this NEC meeting is and what the agreement is, if ever there is an agreement on how President Jacob Zuma will be exiting, and some of the demands that he has made within these meetings with the ANC's top 6 officials, as well as with the president of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa.
Earlier on, you said that President Zuma had wanted to make some representations at this particular gathering, but that was denied him. I wonder if we can read anything into that. Hello, Aldrin, can you hear me? All right, it looks like we've lost our connection with Aldrin Sampear, who's live outside the gathering where the ANC's National Executive Committee, its NEC, is deciding the fate of the president of the country, President